Hello, Cameron. Finally,
Hello.
finally, it's working. There been a technical issue with me. I show my age every time I try to do technological stuff that are current. Kind of like not that old, but I am that old. It's kind of
Mm.
funny. How's it going?
Good, good.
You just came back from China, right?
No, I came back from Europe. I was,
Europe. Ah, I
yeah.
thought you were in Asia. My bad.
I've been to Asia. Actually, it's been a while since I've been to Asia, but planning a trip soon, hopefully.
Then maybe it's another Cameron.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
so you were in Europe. Where did you go?
I was in London, Paris, and then London, Prague, and then Paris.
Ooh. Um, were you there with a family, right, or by yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I was with family. It was my mom had an event that she was going to in London. My brother had an event he was going to in Prague, so I just tagged along.
Are you usually from originally from London?
Oh no, 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 no. I don't. None of my family lives in Europe, but we just happen to coincidentally have separate trips planned. Mm.
Yeah,
Mm.
California is nice, so it's better.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The weather's nice here.
Did you like Prague? Did you experience
When-
the party life of it?
Not really. I think I just did the touristy things. I went to the cathedral, the old town square, the castle, like all the stuff that, and walked along the river. I didn't really have time to do any of the nightlife stuff, so maybe next time I go back. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, Prague is a very interesting place for fun. Hopefully, next time you go with that in mind.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, but
Mhm.
that's cool, man. Like going, I mean, although traveling with your parents is fun. I don't know. I have never done that, so I don't know. But it sounds like fun. I don't know. They probably look at things in a different perspective, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's just good family time. It's like a sort of a mini family reunion.
Mhm. So where you have systems behind you, I see.
Hmm. Yeah, just it's kind of a mess. It's just like filmmaking equipment, random stuff. I haven't really organized it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Hey, you're doing, and you're gonna keep doing, and that's what matters, man.
Hmm.
So, Cameron, is you are a filmmaker,
Yeah.
a lover of action, and mixing genres and known IPs, and I've seen only two things that you've done, which is
Hmm.
Spider Chan and um,
John Witch.
oh, John Witch. Yeah, sorry, I
Yes.
forgot the
Yeah,
name. I
yeah.
was like, John Witch. Why not? Why is not
Mm.
coming? And yeah, it shows clear love and appreciation for it. But I would love to
Mm.
know a little bit about how did you get into film? How did you get to do
Hmm.
action? What did you do before?
Hmm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so how I got into film, because I always loved watching movies. Like my family would always have movie nights, so like a love for film was very early on, and a lot of the early movies I watched was like I love like obviously as a kid you watch Disney movies, Pixar movies, but then also I fell in love with like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, like Donnie Yen, Hong Kong classic kung fu movies. And but to like actually like that stuff felt like uh too complicated or too far away when I was a kid, where I was like, oh, I don't know how to, I have no idea how any of that is made.
Mhm.
But the way I fell in love with actually trying to film my own stuff was like it was right, like when I was like a teenager. That's around the time that YouTube became a thing, and people started to upload like little short films and sketches on YouTube, and that felt much more approachable. Where I was like,
Mhm.
oh, and they also would make behind the scenes videos of like, here's how we filmed this thing, which
Okay.
then was a great education. So I picked up my camera and started filming my own little skits and shorts, and so that's sort of how I got into actually trying to make movies. And Yeah, I guess in terms of action, it was the childhood love for Hong Kong kung fu movies. And then once I moved to Los Angeles, I met a lot of stunt performers who actually like professionally work in the industry. And I was like, oh, this is why my action videos that I filmed when I was younger sucked, because I don't know how to fight. But when you have performers who are really, really good, that's what makes an action film great, is that you have people who really know how to do it well. And then I also learned a lot from the filming side and editing side to help them look even cooler. Yeah.
So you always wanted to do movies?
I guess the initial goal, like I wanted to be a YouTuber. That was like the dream. Like I think maybe nowadays a lot of kids want to do that, but I was like I was the first or second wave of people of like, oh, you can make a living posting videos on the internet. But then I also ended up going to film school. Like in high school, I wanted to be a YouTuber, but then I went to film school, and then in film school, I decided that I was like, oh, I want to make movies. This is what I want to do. So I kind of did both. I guess I pursued the YouTube dream, but then with the longer term goal of wanting to be a feature film director. So trying to do both. Yeah.
It's amazing, man.
Thank you.
I mean, those are like, it's so difficult to actually like commit to something like that, because you know that like it's such a rocky road. So it takes a certain, it takes two things, right? It takes belief and slight insanity.
Yeah.
And be having a thick skin enough so you don't listen to everybody else. I mean, what you want to make? What you want to do? What? But well, I'm happy you decided to do that. I mean, we're happy to show your films at the festival, and like we're glad to see where you're going to end up. Which we're positive that we will be watching your movies in the future in the cinemas, hopefully.
Yes, hopefully.
But talk to me about action, man. Like what? Because like our festival is, so we made our festival because we felt that there is not enough festival representation, or in general appreciation towards the people who make action. Like there's a lot of appreciation to the genre, the most successful, most lucrative genre in film, but in the same time, it's the least appreciated. Like if you don't feel the stunt, you don't feel it. But it's so well made that you don't feel it. But there was no appreciation, no what's the word? ESL, recognition to the people who take so much work in order to do this. And I'm like, I'm going to start doing this, and I'm going to give people who enjoy doing this type of stuff, especially in short form, a place to present it. Because where can you send an action movie in a festival these days? Where?
Yeah.
And I'm curious because that's another question, is like, in order to do the short form with knowingly that it might not go anywhere besides YouTube, which is a very big thing if it's managed properly, but it might not go anywhere, but you still go to do it. It means like there's a lot of love and appreciation to it. And I want to know more about that. Like how, like what is your process with action? How do you do that? How do you start breaking down a stunt? Do you write the stunt, or do you brainstorm after that, after you have a plot? Like how does it work?
Yeah, so I think I guess like because I'm not a stunt performer myself. I took some wushu classes when I was a kid, but that's the extent of my martial arts experience. But I always loved action movies, so I think I have like in my brain I've stored a lot of action movies, so I kind of know what looks right. And I'm a good like visual my visual imagination is good, so I can like sort of picture like, oh, here's the shot I need, here's what I need. But I think what I learned from action is like I just need to find really great performers to collaborate with. Especially if I can team up with like an action designer. Like the difference between John Witch and Spider-Chan is that Spider-Chan, my lead Kevin, was also an action designer, so he designed the choreography, and so he took the charge on that. So that way I could just focus on knowing the shots I wanted and knowing the beats I needed, but he could help really make the choreography shine. And that's so, especially if he's the lead performer as well. So he knew what his capabilities are. He knew what his stunt team's capabilities were. So that one was very much a great collaboration of like, here's like, I would just give him a list of beats I would want, and there's a couple of visual effects shots that I knew that I wanted to do that I would do the visual effects for, and then he could handle the rest in terms of the action, and then he would pitch me ideas. I would sort of we would bounce back and forth on ideas, and versus for like John Witch, that was before I sort of teamed up with an action designer, so that was purely in my head of like, let me just watch tons of John Wick action scenes and try to consolidate of like what are the beats I want. But then I did have a great performer. He didn't action design the whole film, but I was like, I'm going to explain to you every beat that I want. And I have a shot list that's very detailed. And we would film like a really rough version of it just so that everybody can know like a rough idea of what we're filming. So that was roughly like, here's that one maybe is a little bit less martial arts heavy. There's a lot of like Harry Potter magic stuff. So that was also like watching Harry Potter movies and like, here's a Harry Potter spell I want. Here's a John Wick action beat I want, and then combining them. But then also like doing good preparation of like really writing everything down in detail, trying to imagine the film in my head as much as I can, so that when we get to shooting, I know what I need. I know all the shots I need, and I just check them off a list.
Well, like John Wick was so much fun to watch, man. Like it's so imaginary, and it's like you mesh the genres. It was smooth and so well done.
Thank
the
you.
audience. No, I again, I'm not talking for myself because I'm biased.
Mhm.
I love action. I love what I do. I'm not a stunt person either. I'm a fan, so I created this as a fan, and but I react from how the audience reacts to it, right? In the cinema, it's like, oh, this is so like we have one of my friends who's also a guest of mine. She's like, that was my favorite movie.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, man, like it's so much fun to see it because it's mashing this genre and this genre. Oh yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Not easy, right? So it's kind of like I don't know, like yeah. Anyway, I can go about this until next week, but I'm more curious about you. Like so you're not a stunt person. You took only wushu, which kind of relates to the 5 weeks of karate I did when I was a kid, or maybe a little bit more, not more than 5. But what I don't know, man. I honestly don't know. I'm not an interviewer. I'm a festival director, but I do want to. I want to know. I just kind of want to know your process.
Yeah.
How do you come up with an idea? How do you break it down? And again, one of the more funny things that I've saw, it's like you ask a person, how do I film a dialogue? And they give you, the classic 2-shot OTS. But then you ask them, okay, but how do I film somebody getting slapped in the face without actually being slapped in the face? How to frame it? So it's kind of like the thinking of action is very different. So I want to hear how that.
Yeah, I guess it's because I think it's like from like my YouTube background, I'm always making stuff. So like I feel like the creative sort of like flow is always there. So for like I can break down maybe specifically John Wick and Spider-Chan. Is that John Wick? I happened to in the same week I watched the last Harry Potter movie, like the Deathly Hallows Part 2, and I also that was maybe the same week that John Wick 2 just came out in theaters. So I watched both in the same week, and I was like, oh, there's like magic fights happening in the Harry Potter movie, but they're not like designed like actual martial arts or like it's more of like, oh, it's kind of like a duel, or it's like fencing kind of. It's not really but they're like shooting spells at each other, so it's more like a projectile. So in my head, it was just sort of like, I don't know, maybe when I was walking around and just subconsciously, I was like, oh, what if it's like a Harry Potter like magic fight, but in the style of like a John Wick action scene. And similarly with Spider-Chan, it was like I had rewatched, like over the pandemic, I had rewatched like all the Police Story movies, and I got back into Jackie Chan stuff. And then obviously Spider-Man is always, they have a new movie every couple of years. And then I was like, oh, like this could actually be like, I was even thinking of like my big dream of like, if one day I get to do a superhero movie, what would my take be on it? And if I did a Spider-Man movie, I'm like, well, he's like a acrobat, he's like a martial artist, he's like at certain points where I think it's like Shang-Chi, like in the comics, trains Spider-Man in certain martial arts. And I was like, oh, but what if or like the other way, what if like Jackie's character in Police Story had superpowers? Like, it's like, what would that be? So it was very much like, I don't know if there's like a conscious effort of thinking about how to mash them up. They come kind of somewhat organically. And then also once I did John Wick, there was an element of like, oh, what's the next thing that could be a good mashup that feel like a good fit? Sort of apply an action style to a existing like franchise that didn't have that action style and see how that would mesh. And that was sort of the original ideas of both.
First of all, I would definitely watch Jackie Chan being Spider-Man any day.
Yeah.
Take my money, take it, just take it. I'll pay. Even now, when he says 60, I think, or 65, I'll still watch him now being Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Any day. The guy is that team is amazing, man. Like what they did with him, Simu, and the third guy is always running out of my head. But it's a team of three that came from the Chinese circus school, and they just created this like huge thing, and like it's amazing, the physical part, and it's amazing like how they understand cinema, not just the stunt, and how it's like how the mashup happens. Don't mind me if I'm asking, Cameron, how old are you?
I'm 30.
You're 30.
I was born in 93.
93. Oh my God! I immigrated to Israel when I was 93. I was 8 back then. Holy shit! Okay, yeah.
But you're still in your 30s, right?
I'm turning 40 this year.
24. Okay. But right now we're still in the same decade, so we're the same range.
No, it's okay. In 1 week it's gonna be different. Well, dude, like, I don't know, like, so it's clear that those are like your inspirations. It's clear that that's where it's coming from. How do you like what? What do you have a team you usually work with, or how does that or like because you didn't have the action designer on John Wick, which was exquisitely done, especially the one that he jumps from like the top and just appears behind the couch.
Yeah.
Again, like those, I loved it. We loved it, and that was why it was in the festival. But you have a team right now. Did you build up? Are building up towards a team, or how does it work?
So I don't have like a permanent team. It's like, I think the benefit of being in LA is that I just know a lot of stunt performers who are friends of mine. So they're always like, there's a lot of collaboration going on here. So usually it's like, if I have a project, I'll like reach out to some people who I think would be a good fit and whoever's available. Cause a lot of them are like booked and busy and they're like on TV shows, or they're out of town because they're shooting some show or something. So there's not like a permanent team, but everybody's also like always eager to make something cool, and hopefully I have enough of a track record now that like when I hit somebody up, they're like, oh, that guy's like, I know his stuff is good, so I want to make time to like go film something with him. So right now it's like a mix. So it's like, even for John Wick, like all the actors I had worked with before, like because I was doing a lot of YouTube videos, so I would hit up friends like, hey, I'm doing a YouTube short, you want to come over and just like film a little fun thing? And then John Wick was obviously a bigger scale than just a normal YouTube short, and Spider-Chan was a bigger scale. But yeah, I don't have a permanent team, but have a good network of collaborators that I can tap into when I need to.
So every time you have to adjust to a new team and kind of like recalculate what are the possibilities, what are the abilities, and then adjust the possibilities to them.
To a certain extent, I think the good thing about like professional stunt performers is that they all have like a solid baseline of like skills. Like they can do basic fight. Like they always have like some boxing ability. They have some like they can do sort of fight choreography already like at a base level. And then everybody has specialties. Like that guy's really good at falls. That guy has vehicle experience, or that guy is good at this. So generally like sort of knowing what everybody is capable of doing and then sort of assigning what their specialty is. And for Spider-Chan, like one of the pitches that Kevin, our lead, did to bring on people was that a lot of them were looking to like add a cool fall to their stunt reel. So we were like, oh, how about like you can pitch us like a fall that you want to do, and we'll incorporate that into choreography so that now you have something to add to your reel.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's a kind of like everybody gets to sort of pitch in, and it adds to the quality of my work as well.
So hold on, how many different falls do you have on that set?
I'm trying to think. In Spider-Chan, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. there's like five big falls, or like five wrecks where it's like, oh, there's like the girl who runs into the web and falls, or there's the guy gets webbed in the face and there's like a scorpion thing. Like that was like a really cool move that he wanted to show off. And then there's like a one where like the guy with the baseball bat does like a crazy backflip into like a face plant on the ground. So he had like a bunch of he had like stunt pads, and he was like wearing a protective vest. And for a lot of those also, like because I'm like an amateur visual effects artist, I knew like I could put stunt pads on the ground for the actors to fall on, and I could remove the stunt pads in post. So that way it was safer for them, but also like they would have been down to do it without stunt pads, but just to do it multiple times, it would have been safer and more comfortable for them. And the audience wouldn't even be able to tell, hopefully, that we removed the stunt pads.
No, they could. It was a fun short. It is a fun short, and I cannot wait. I can't wait to have the reaction of the audience this year, man. We have one of the most amazing things is to discover like the next generation of action makers, man. It's so much fun. So much fun to have like and it's short films, and like the ability to encapsulate so much in such a short time. It always amazes me, man. It always amazes me. I'm like I said, I'm a fan. I'm biased, but to me it sounds like you're more of a filmmaker before everything. And I'm curious, like what type of stories you want to tell. Like what interests you? What interests you, Cameron?
Oh yeah, so I think I have so right now, interestingly, like I'm like I want to keep doing action, but sort of right now another focus of mine is doing horror films, mainly because horror films are cheaper to do, because action requires showing a lot of cool stuff versus horror is often in the build-up, and it's like the tension, and it's not actually having to show. But I love horror, and I love there is like I don't think I'm gonna lock myself into exclusively telling sort of Asian American stories or stories that are, but I like the idea of like sort of cross-cultural films, like movies where you're like, oh, let's combine Hong Kong action film with a Spider-Man thing. Or my current, the big short film that I'm working on right now is like about like an Asian American adoptee living in a sort of an American suburb, and the specifics of that. And she's adopted, so she's like Asian but not Asian, and what is that like? So those are things I'm currently passionate about, but I love really all types of movies. So the dream is to like I love doing action and I love doing horror, but hopefully one day I can do something where it's like it's not even it takes elements from both, or it's not like strictly a specific genre where it's like, oh, it's not even, you can't even define it by the exact genre it's in. But yeah, I guess I have a lot of interests, but those are the current focus right now.
Okay. Horror kung fu movie.
But yeah, and I think I was like, I want to sort of delve into like there's like a history of like specific Hong Kong 70s and 80s like vampire ghost movies that like I never really watched growing up, but I was aware of them, that I kind of want to deep dive into just to see like pull some inspiration from those.
Yeah, they were pretty ridiculous, and they were super erotic, which is
which is maybe why I didn't watch them, or my parents didn't want me to watch them. But the kung fu movies were easier. They're like, oh, it's just fighting. That's okay. Yeah,
like those horror films were extremely weirdly erotic, because like you're not used to watching that thing in like Chinese old kung fu movies or something. It's like, because it's horror, you can, I don't know, it's like a slasher movie, right? It's like you gotta have a naked woman sleeping with somebody and dying first.
Oh yeah, it's similar to like the exploitation films of like in the US, like the B movies and like the slash. Yeah.
Do you want to make B type of movies? Is that because we have a vacuum of those, complete vacuum of those.
I think maybe just some extent, like it could be fun to play in that world, because I like sometimes I like really campy movies that are like, oh, it's like you know that it's kind of like the joke is that it's kind of campy. Like recently there was like that movie, what is it, The Beekeeper, the Jason Statham movie, which I wasn't sure if I would like it. Then I watched it and I was like, oh, I love how like purposely kind of stupid it is, but like in a really entertaining way. Like it's really over the top sometimes, and the jokes are really goofy, where I'm like, oh, this actually really works for me, because it's like, oh, it's ridiculous, but that's the point of it. It's meant to be ridiculous.
another pun of bees. So many puns about bee and beekeepers.
So many, yeah. And I'm like,
and
what the reveal? Like, hopefully that's not a spoiler, but it's like when the reveal of who the villain's like mom was, you're like, wait, what? The villain's mom is the
the
president?
president
What
of
the
the
hell?
United States.
What the hell?
What's going on?
And it's so ridiculous, but I'm like, actually, I'm on board with this. This is how I love how crazy it is.
No, it went over the top too quickly, man. Too over and too quick, and it was just like, what? Wait, she's
Yeah,
she was like some type of senator.
yeah. They're like, nope, we're going all the way.
No, it's the fucking president of the United States.
Yeah,
Deal with it, buddy. I'm like, holy.
yeah, and that's like a B movie thing to do. But I was like, okay,
yeah, no
sometimes
pun intended.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was that. I don't know. I think towards the end, I guess, like I was so tuned out. It was like, what the hell is going on? There's secret beekeeping society. But I think that's the fun part. Like if that's actually done properly, it's actually really good.
Yeah, it was done on purpose. I was just like, they're in on the joke of this. Like they are aware that they're just doing this on purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy is so underrated. David Ayers. He's got a Furies. I think is one of the best war films I've ever seen, and that's kind of like what it is. But what is there something that you are trying you will try to like say with your movies, or are you just here to entertain? How do you look at the medium that you're trying to create?
Yeah, I think to me, like I think entertainment value is like is the baseline. Like I feel like I need to make something that like it, but it needs to, like, if it fails to entertain, then I'm failing at the basics of what I think I want to do as a filmmaker. But ideally, when I can, I want to sort of infuse it with a story that I really care about. Like the current horror short film that I'm doing is like a 20-minute like horror drama, which has like hopefully the audience gets a little like gets emotional at the end. Like that's what I want, and very different from Spider-Chan or John Witch, which are like purely like, let me really try to do a thing that's entertaining. Like that's the number one goal. And the goal as a filmmaker is to try to, when I can, combine both. But I do think like entertainment value is something that I want to always provide. Even if I'm like trying to tell like a more heartfelt, dramatic story, I want the audience to be like, oh, but also it's like a spooky horror movie. So hopefully you enjoy the horror sequences and you enjoy the atmosphere that I bring. But then you're like, oh, actually that's a story that I really resonated with. So that's sort of the goal is to do both. Yeah.
Where did the story come from?
So that one is I think it's like, because I've known a lot of Asian adoptees. I've known several Asian adoptees just like in my life who I've known, oh, they were adopted. And it happens a lot in the US where it's like an Asian child adopted by like an American family. And I've always like, it's always like the idea of like reuniting with the biological parents or something, or like, what is that like? Or what does it feel like to be an adoptee in a culture that is different from what your skin says you are? And then how you don't feel like you belong in either world fully. And also like, that's not just like an adoptee thing, it's an immigrant thing too. Like no matter if you're Asian or not, it's like when you're an immigrant to a new country, you're like, oh, and especially if you grew up there, but you look different, then people are like, oh, you aren't quite an American. But then also Chinese people don't accept you as them because you don't speak the language or understand the culture. And so like that inner turmoil is what I was trying to explore with the new film. So that's like, this is very different from like a pure entertainment thing where I'm like, here's the thematic thing I'm trying to explore for the character, but then let's also let me make it a horror movie. Let's make it like kind of a
digestible.
Yeah, kind of like a slasher movie at first, but then you're like, oh, but it's like a bittersweet reveal of like a ghost or something. It's like, and then there's like a hopefully like at the end of like the audience is like, oh, I see the heart here. It's like a horror movie with heart. That's how I'd pitch it.
Oh, like I love it. I love it. Is that I can relate to that because I immigrated twice in my life. Once when I was 8 and once like 9 years ago to Canada. So it is the sensation of like it's like everywhere is your home and nowhere is your home.
Yeah.
And you're always trying to find that place, but it's like this void that I don't know if it will ever be filled. Do you feel that way? Did you,
Mm.
were you born in the States, or did
So
you?
so yeah, for me it was like I guess I'm the same where I've immigrated twice technically, but in the same country. It's like I immigrated from the US to China when I was a kid because I was born here, but then my
Uh-huh.
parents moved back to Shanghai in China. So I immigrated when I was 6 as an
Okay.
American kid in Minnesota to Shanghai in China. And I was like, oh, but people were like, oh, but you're an American. And I was like, oh, but I guess, but once I picked up the language in China, then I kind of was able to blend in more.
Mhm.
But oftentimes people will be aware that I was like an American before I moved. And then I immigrated back to the US when I was 16. So it was sort of like, even though I was fluent in English, it was kind of like, oh, I still had to relearn like what it meant to live in America. So that there is like the double culture shock of like, oh, I'm both, but then I'm kind of also neither. But then
Wow.
so it's yeah, so that is I think maybe where personally where this horror film I'm working on I drew inspiration from.
So you're kind of like trying to figure out how you feel about it by
Mhm.
putting a play.
Yeah. And the thing
Yeah.
is like I think by making it like an Asian adoptee, it's like a very
Mhm.
specific story about an Asian adoptee, but hopefully because it's very specific and personal, it actually ends up being kind of universal, where it's like, oh, everybody can kind of any immigrant who's moved to a different place, even though this movie isn't specifically about their experience, they can understand what the character is going through.
But do you feel that it allows you to have a perspective that is both attached and detached, and kind of like
Mhm.
have it's not necessarily like opinion is not the right word, but have an opinion or a perspective that is not necessarily from the inside, so it kind of removes that emotional bias that you're a part of, but in the same time you are also attached to it emotionally because you're part. It's kind of like the dissonance. Does it help, or do you think it comes in the way
I
for you?
think it's I think it's like because I think where I settled on I think because I benefited from being in China for like a decade, like I
Mhm.
really learned the language and the culture, and then I've been in the U.S. for like 2/3 of my life, so it's I think it's like as much as it's where I'm like, oh, you don't quite fit in both, I also feel like I actually get to be both simultaneously. So
Yeah,
but I think what you said about like also maintaining like an outsider perspective where you can see I can see America more objectively, I can see China more objectively because I have the other. Like I don't
mhm.
I'm not as bought into like American exceptionalism as much as a lot of Americans are. I see the sort of the media bias in both countries. I'm like, oh, here's obviously like in China there's a lot of propaganda, and you're like, oh, how do I see through that to see what the reality is? But in America, I'm like, oh, a lot of people in America don't actually believe that there's propaganda, even though there is so it's like it's a weird, but it's like hopefully I think my specific upbringing allows me to like kind of be at least it's really difficult to see through the bias on both sides, but you can kind of to some extent be like, oh, I kind of understand how if you're not locked into the American ecosystem, how it looks from the outside.
Oh wow, that, that's I feel that here,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really like the because like China, for example, from the
Mm-hmm.
little I know, it doesn't have one or two layers of culture. It has layers under layers under layers under layers under layers under layers of culture and subculture and subculture and
Mm-hmm.
attitude, and everything means so much. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's such a unique and different, like completely again from the little I know, like
Mm-hmm.
completely different uh, approach, even to time. Like one of the things I adopted from the Chinese culture is that the idea of like it's actually okay to be late.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It's fine. If you wait a few minutes, nothing is gonna happen. So, I mean, I'm not encouraging things to be late, especially in film, but and it's such so different. So it's kind of like I'm curious about how your head kind of like calculates all that, because America is such a opposite and different
It's such a
culture than.
young country. It's like historical perspective is
Yeah,
somewhat limited, where you're like, oh, but like this existence has this specific system has only been around for like 250 years,
yeah,
and before that it was a completely different world before the
yeah.
Europeans came. So it's like it's hard to versus like maybe the Chinese perspective is like, oh, I guess the rise and falls of dynasties and like a 1,000-year view of like, oh, okay, like right now this is just the current dynasty, who knows, but there's like a longer term view, maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know if that
yeah.
makes
No,
sense. Yeah.
no, no, it does. It does. Like
Mhm.
the older the culture, the more it kind of it's more adaptable to the changes that come with the times and
Mhm.
understanding it's like, you cannot always be on top, and it's like the time is fluent, same with the country, and but the culture it
Yeah.
remains, and as long as it remains, and I really think that really um like for me as a person who wants to tell stories, I really think that
Mhm.
really helps with the way I perceive stories, because stories have no, especially in the medium of what we're doing,
Mhm.
you can watch it in, like, somebody will be watching even the short films
Mhm.
in 200, 300, 400 years from now, because the data is out there, and
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
stories that you can tell. And I think the more I might be going on too long on this, but I'm really
Mhm.
curious, because I do think it really affects the type of filmmaker you are, that the stories you want to tell, right? Because
Mhm.
like sometimes you go into this, but you don't really have enough perspective to tell a proper story. But like this movie that you're talking about, it
Mhm.
feels like something that you're coming from deep within. So it's
Mhm.
very interesting that it's so different and yet so personal on what we've seen so far.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I definitely think it's like you're talking about. Like, I think also you need life experience to, because I think, look, when I was in film school, which I graduated when I was 23, um, I think a lot of people spend a ton of money on like their graduation thesis film, and I think a lot of them sucked, not because they sucked, but it's because they were too young or they didn't have the life experience to like tell a story that really mattered. Um, and I feel like, oh, I'm glad that I didn't spend a ton of money at that time to make a film, because I think I needed just some time to like live life and also build my skills over time to like, okay, now is the time to maybe try to make a personal, like, bigger short film. And then even though like John Wick and Spider-Chan are like very different than this film I'm making now, like just as like a filmmaker, like knowing how to run a set, knowing how to direct, knowing how to like all of that stuff translates over to even if it's a very different style or a story.
What's the thing that taught you the most about directing, besides failing?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's um like making set like enjoyable, like having a good attitude, keeping the positive attitude, like even when you're stressed, it's like when you're the director on set, it's just like you have to be the captain of the ship, and then everybody else can feed off of your energy. So there's an element of like just like making sure that you're in the right mindset, and even when things are stressful, don't let it show to other people, because once the director seemed to like be losing their mind, everything else sort of grinds to a halt. So you need to, but also like it's like remembering how fun and how sort of privileged a position it is to get to like make movies. Like this is like it's fun. It's like it's the thing that we dreamed of doing. So that helps with the mindset thing. And obviously like just being planning well, being well prepared, and then just like setting deadlines is very helpful, because it's, as an artist, especially if you're like nobody hired you to make something, you could like work on it forever. So having like either like maybe a specific festival that you're trying to submit to or something, that for whatever reason come up with a deadline that you have to hit, and then plan everything from there and just break it down. I'm like, how do we get to that? How do we finish this thing by this point, and then break everything down into smaller steps, and then just do the small steps until you get to the finish line.
That's extremely wise. No, it's
Thank
like
you.
that
Yeah.
that idea of it, because like you can edit something and you can work on something and you can polish any turd to be gold, or
Mhm.
any gold to be more gold,
Mhm.
until until pigs fly. That's very wise, man. Like, do you feel that do you feel that there's a difference when you make action or something that is not as let's say coordinating heavy?
Oh yeah, I think it's just like a different muscle that you got to practice. Like when I'm doing Spider-Chan or John Witch, it's like very much like a keep track of the geography, making sure all the hits land, and like seeing how it sort of in the sequence how it works as a like the action beats, and if the action beats are creative enough and fun. And then obviously like a dramatic dialogue scene is very different from that, where it's like, oh, the setup is actually very simple. We're not doing a ton of different camera angles or like something logistically difficult. So it's more so just like working with the actors to like get a performance out of like what is the emotional thing we're trying to have the character feel and what do we want the audience to feel, and then just like giving the actors space. Because also like obviously like an action actor, like a stunt performer, and like a dramatic actor have sort of different skill sets. So it's also like how do you and also every actor has a different sort of process as well. So just trying to find so yeah, that's something I've learned. I had to learn as well. Like I'm in no way an expert, but I'm learning of like, oh, the different dynamics and how do you plan for each is different. Yeah.
Did you take some acting class itself?
I took acting classes in film school. Like we were in film school, we were required to take acting classes. So I think I got a good baseline understanding of like what the actor's process is and what the different methods are. But also I think one thing I learned was just like, oh, like for the latest short film, we actually went through like a whole casting process. So we had casting directors and we had auditions come in. And I realized so much of directing actors is in the casting process. Like once you cast the right actor, your job is so much easier on set. Because I'm like, oh, I cast the right person. So as long as they understand, and it's just giving the actors room, like instead of micromanaging it, it's like, oh, that they know. And also like, yeah, it's like acting, like great acting is magic. It's like a magic trick. You're like, what? How can you just like pull this off? And like, especially on a film set where it's like, it's not a very, like maybe in theater, it's more like, oh, you're just playing out a whole scene. It's like, you can get into the groove of it. Like it's film sets are like not really conducive to like organic emotion coming out. So for actors to be like, we're going to do 5 takes of this one scene, and every time they nail it, that's crazy to me. Like I like it's still magic to me where I'm like, it's cool to see.
Yeah, it's I had the privilege to work with some really talented actors in Canada, and it's so cool. Just give them a breadcrumb, just a couple of breadcrumbs, and when they're right, when they're like you said, like when they're the right person, just let them run with it. If they run too far, just pull them back. But let them run with it. Pull them back. Give them a little push. But it's so much fun when we have the right person doing the right thing, and just it's again in other position they don't give enough credit. The casting, right? It's like filmmaking is so weird. It's so weird. It's so weird. Like the acolytes go to. I mean, acting is super important, but the acolytes sometimes go to the final frontier, not to the people that created the foreground. You know, like there's the cinematography and the direction and the casting and the set design, and then you get to the set and you say the lines, and that's where the acolyte goes, which is kind of funny. It's like in for sports, right? Like the acolytes, like a team sport, the acolyte goes to the person who scores, but it never goes to the person or not enough.
The great defensive player sometimes doesn't get as much. Or like the quarterback in American football gets the accolades, and sometimes like the defensive linemen don't get as much. Even though
like the guy who blocks from the quarterback actually doing the pass. So it's like it's up to the quarterback to actually say, hey, this guy actually allowed me to do all these passes. But it's kind of like amazing about filmmaking that it's so much work to do this silly, and yet such an amazing film, man. Okay, I ask everybody this question. What is the most obscure action movie that you can recommend anybody to watch?
Ooh, so right now this is like, I don't know if it's more like a more cartoonish. It's like a live action Looney Tunes kind of, but there's a movie called Hundreds of Beavers that it's just out. I think you can rent it on like Amazon and iTunes and all that. But it was like it's like a, you can search it up on, like it had a really successful festival run. Like it was at all the genre festivals this year. But it's like but it's still like obviously an indie movie that was made for very little money. I think the budget was like $100,000, but it looks insane. But it's like, it's not a traditional like martial arts. It actually does have like one proper martial arts fight sequence, but it's mostly like kind of more in the Looney Tunes cartoon vibe, but it's so entertaining. It's like my favorite movie of the year. Hundreds of Beavers, highly recommend.
Is it live action or animation?
It's live action, but it's like a live action cartoon kind of. It's like a lot of
Slapstick.
a lot of slapstick, but like the super creative slapstick, and like in some ways,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like a in some ways it's kind of like a live action video game too, because you're like, oh, this person is collecting certain things and with a specific goal, and it's like the rules are really well designed. It's like they thought through the mechanics of the rules of the world
How
really,
does it
really
called?
well.
100
Hundreds
Beavers?
of beavers, yeah, hundreds
Where
of.
it's from?
It was like I think it was shot in Michigan, but the
Oh, so
director,
it's an American movie. Okay.
it's an American movie, but the director lives in LA. And I think they just finished like a very successful independent theatrical run. And yeah, so highly recommend. Really, really good.
Interesting. I mean, okay, Crank is interested as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Oh, actually, I think one of the people at your festival this year, the director, John Truey, he did like the
okay.
44th Chamber of Shaolin.
Yeah.
He was the action designer on Hundreds of Beavers.
Really?
Yeah, so that's yeah.
Have you watched it, by the way?
I have not yet, but I want to see it.
Chamber?
It's been on the same festival circuit as Spider-Chan, so I've been meaning to. Yeah,
I loved it so much. It has this. It's really well made. It's really, really well made. It just made me feel like, oh, I'm watching this old school and yet modern take of. Have you seen? No. What's his? I forgot the movie. Leroy, Dragon. It's from the 80s. Sho'nuff. What's the name of the movie?
Oh, I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I feel like I don't know if I can't remember the name, but I feel like I
yeah. Kind of reminded me of that, like that vibe. That kind of like there's an innocence and yet like. Anyway, it's well made. I really enjoyed it, and I will definitely look into Hundreds of Beavers. Definitely.
Just search the trailer on YouTube. I think the trailer will hook you because you're like, oh, what the hell is this? I've never seen a movie. It feels like so different from sort of a traditional Hollywood movie. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you for telling me about that. In all seriousness, Cameron, though, like we are so happy to see Spider-Chan because it's such a evolution from John Witch. And first of all, I cannot wait. What's the movie that you're creating is called?
Right now, it's called Forgive Me. That's the title.
Okay. Well, I cannot wait to watch it. Might not be fitting for Crank, but
but hopefully, Are you based around the Toronto area or Hamilton area?
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully we'll make a stop. Like hopefully next year is the big festival run for that short film. So I'll let you know if we have a screening in Toronto.
I would love to go and watch it. It sounds like something I would probably relate to. And for the bigger run, we can not wait. I'm speaking for myself. I can't wait to see what you're gonna do when you have access to a bigger budget and bigger team and larger story and how much play you're going to do with it. Because it again, like throughout these conversations I'm having with the filmmakers that showcase their projects in the festival, like one thing is very clear, that most filmmakers that are sending us their films, like it's clear that they love to play, which is like the best part about filmmaking. Like you come and play. It's like you said, you cannot be nervous, and it shows that you love to play. It shows that you have talent, and like you're 30 years old and you've done this, and you have this perspective about directing already, which is very unique. So I can't wait to see what you're gonna do next.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Don't hang up. I'm just gonna stop the recording.
Cool.